Sir K.R.A. Sambaswarao, our Honorable Vice Chancellor, is the chief guest. Professor K.V. Reddy, Head of the Department Political Science, and Professor K. Robin, Head of the Department History and Ethnography, they are the guest speakers. My esteemed colleague, Professor Lalin Truanga, Dean, School of Social Sciences, then Professor Jokai Truagi, former Dean, Professor of Psychology, is here, and I also welcome all other guests and the participants from this university. Now I see our Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor J.K. Patnaik, is also here, and I welcome all of them, and with the kind permission of our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor K.R.A. Sambaswara Rao, we are starting this program, and at the outset, it is my proud privilege to request our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Sir, Professor K.R.A. Sambaswara Garu, to speak a few words of encouragement. Then our guest speakers will take over. Professor Rao, sir.
Thank you very much, Professor Patti, sir. Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor Patnaik, sir, and Dean Professor Renitulanga, and today's speakers, Professor Robin and Professor K.V. Reddy, Professor Jokai Tulangi, and other faculty members and research scholars and students. First of all, let me greet all of you for celebrating 75 years of India's Independence Day, Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, which is very important 75th year of independence of our country. And we all already started this celebration. This is the third series of lecture which is being celebrated by us. And we are also I pay my homage to our great heroes and great leaders on their birth anniversary. More often, they are actually even they are well remembered as Mahatma Gandhi's Jayanti and also Lal Bahadur Shastri Jayanti on this auspicious day. And we remember them and we pay homage to those two leaders. And they should be remembered for their sacrifices and commitment and fighting towards the India's independence and independent India's development. Both the leaders have struggled much, and they have been made a path to the young generation to know about their contribution and patriotism of the country, and how they fought for India's independence. And after independence, they actually struggled a lot during their lifetime. And Lal Bahadur Shastri is a great follower of Mahatma Gandhi ji. And he always says that he always remembers Mahatma Gandhi for his patriotism and for his country's sacrifices in different forms ever since he landed in South Africa in 1890. And Indians actually had a great experience of Mahatma Gandhi. And the Indians had made an indelible mark in South Africa because of Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi's fight against injustice and class justice during the period of 1893 and 1914. He has struggled a lot and helped the South African liberation movement and helped the Indians. Now every Indian who is settled in South Africa, maybe more than 1.5 million people who are settled in South Africa, Indian population, they remember Mahatma Gandhi ji. And they always remember that how Indians are living very comfortably in South Africa. They just arrived, Indians arrived only with the beginning of 340 people in a ship as tea estate workers that time. And they have been now settled almost over 160 years in South Africa. And after so many struggles, actually, they were actually now comfortably placed in South Africa, and it was a wonderful remembrance. And Gandhi has followed the liberation of South African movement. He fought against the racial discrimination and also everything. He has continued the same um, uh, um, fighting against the racial discrimination and also the feudalistic rule of the English country. For more than 200 years, they have ruled our country, and it was very prominent in the in our history, in our country's history. And finally, India has got independence on 15th August 1947, and it was due to the sacrifice of many people like Mahatma Gandhi ji, Lal Bahadur Shastri ji, and Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, and many other Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, and many other leaders uh, have struggled, and they even they sacrificed their lives for India's independence. This was actually has to be remembered that India's independence is because of the sacrifices of many people who got this. And India has been growing very well in the present scenario because after the independence has given us the fruit of the country's liberation and country's sacrifices by many people, how they have actually fought against the British rule and how they got the independence. And there are many, a small platform is not enough to remember all the sacrifices and all the fightings of many people who has done a great sacrifices to our country. But it is a day that at least on um, the day of their birth anniversary, at least if you remember them, and millions of people, Indians, drew inspiration from the Mahatma Gandhi ji and also Lal Bahadur Shastri ji for their sacrifice and for their fighting against the racial discrimination and for liberation of independence. They have done a big sacrifices. And it was a day that youngsters, particularly students, have to understand the importance of the sacrifices and country's liberation. Every country has got liberation movements because from the when they wanted separation or when they wanted Independence Day, but how it has been struggled, it has been a model in the in the whole world that actually the non-violence movement actually has been initiated by Mahatma Gandhi ji, and which has been at South Africa first he initiated that, and later on it has been extended to our country in India's freedom movement also by the Mahatma Gandhi ji, and it has been uh, continued here in India, and finally they got the liberation of independence, India, and it was actually remembered by many countries and many people in the world. They still remember non-violence means India's liberation activity only they remember. So after the liberation of our country, there are many people like Ambedkar ji and many other people, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, and they have fought against the various evil forces to make united India and also to develop the constitution of India. And the Indian constitution has been narrated by Ambedkar ji, and now many leaders have emerged, and independent India now has been one of the leading countries in the world, that particularly in self-reliance, self-reliant India. And during COVID time, whole world actually been looking towards the India and how India is going to face the situation. And finally, India during particularly second wave, in everybody, including WHO, has been looking towards India, how it is going to be, and they have even threatened India that India is going to suffer like anything, and a very worst suffering they have expected. But wherever everybody is surprised, India has made a tremendous recovery from that particular situation, and India has got a tremendous revolution, particularly in white revolution, blue revolution, and industrial revolution, and they have made economic crisis also they have been able to control, and food grains and food security has been provided very efficiently, and all the requirements of the vaccinations and even the implements which are required for the control of COVID-19 has been developed in our own country, and indigenous implements have been developed, indigenous vaccines have been developed, and for the surprise of the whole world, that more than 87 crores of people were now vaccinated in India, a population of about almost 45 to 50% of the population is getting vaccinated now. And it was a world surprise that India, how it has come self-reliant, in particularly in able to control the economic condition, economic downfall, and food security, and everything has been able to control. India, thanks to our honorable government, honorable Prime Minister and other leaders of our country who has protected this country, not to go for this kind of economic crisis and also the health crisis, and they could able to control. And it was really wonderful recovery and self-reliance has been proved by our country. So on this occasion of celebration of 75 years of Independence Day, I congratulate all of you, and also I wish that everyone should remember the sacrifices of the people who has fought for our country, and we should continue the same helping the people, helping the humanity, and helping the country, and we extend our hands as far as possible to grow this country into such a manner that India should be one of the leading country in the world. Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to speak on this occasion. Introductory remarks. I'm very much grateful. Maybe there are many speakers, and I happy to listen to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. It's a pleasure to listen to your kind and encouraging words. So before I call upon our guest speakers, only one or two sentences about the day. When we talk about Mahatma Gandhi, he had hundreds and thousands of quotes, quotable quotes. I will quote only one or two. He told, "My life is my message. If you want change in the world, be the change. Then if you are true, you are correct, let the whole world be against you, stand firm. While inside the room, open your windows and doors so the winds of all the cultures may reach you, but have your foot firmly on the ground so that your own self will be intact." And Lal Bahadur Shastri, I call him the person of the shortest height with tallest personality in Indian politics, Indian society. A person of exemplary personality from the childhood till he became Prime Minister of India. His emphasis on food security and external security. Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan. The person who could face the challenges inside and outside. The whole world has seen the diplomatic ability, and we have seen a person when someone told, "Sir, we are facing some food crisis," he told, "Okay, now on, I will skip one of the meals at night every week." This is Lal Bahadur Shastri. And when we celebrate the day October 2nd, Mahatma Gandhi, 1869, Lal Bahadur Shastri, 1904. It is the centuries apart, but how far they are together, they are one because of those universal ideas: sacrifice, their love for truth, peace, non-violence, and someone who stood firm on the belief system. So today's topic, when we are thinking of the subaltern, we are reminded of Antonio Gramsci, the person, the thinker, the writer, the philosopher, the activist who died at the young age of 46 in Italy. But the whole world today echoes the ideas of hegemony and the subaltern and so many other things as enunciated by Antonio Gramsci and echoed by many, many thinkers, writers worldwide. With these few words, it's a pleasure, it's my privilege to invite today's first speaker, Professor K. Robin, who will talk about imperial hegemony and the subaltern resistance in Mizoram. Professor Ravin, please.
Thank you so much, Co-Chairman, Professor Srinivas, Honorable Chief Guest, our Vice Chancellor, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor K.R.S. Sammasivarao, Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor J.K. Patnaik, Dean School of Social Sciences, Professor Lorin Tluanga, our Senior Professor, Professor Zulkai Tluangi, my co-speaker, colleague, Professor K.V. Reddy, dear colleagues, dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed a privilege to be given an opportunity to speak on an occasion like today, 75 years of celebration of India's independence, Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. This is a national program initiated by our Honorable Prime Minister, Professor Narendra Modi, on March 12th this year. It will continue till next year and post 2022 independence up to 2023. And incidentally, as our chairman had mentioned, today it coincided with the birthday of our father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi, and also our nationalist leader and freedom fighter, Lal Bahadur Shastri. And indeed, it's a fortunate privilege for me to speak on this occasion. My topic is imperial hegemony and subaltern resistance in Mizoram. The subaltern category that I'm trying to use today is in the context of unrepresented women in the freedom struggle in the Lusai Hills, the then Mizoram, the then Lusai Hill. You know, our chairman has sent me a text message, so I cannot take for so much time. I have to cut short my speech also, so I'll try my best to cut short my lecture. I mean, rather discussion with you. Now, paucity of historical sources had made us oblivious with the great historical events, the resistance movements which freedom fighters staged in Mizoram, the then Lusai Hills. You know, it has made us sightless about the momentous historical episode, a subaltern confrontation against the imperial authority. When I talk about the imperial authority, I mean the British Raj, the British rule, the British administration. So the subaltern confrontations against the imperial Raj shook the entire Mizoram, the then Lusai Hills. This confrontation was led by Ropiliani, a lone woman who represented the subaltern consciousness by staging obstinately a movement of total struggle against the colonial rule in the Lusai Hills from 1871 till her last breath, till she died in 1895. You know, Ropiliani, inevitably her social standing as well as circumstantial factors compelled her to play a forward role in the resistance movements against the alien British regime. You know, despite the fact that all possible pressures were put upon her, Ropiliani, due to her sheer will and absolute determination, was able to maintain and burn the torches of nationalism with amidst colossal convolution. You know, evidently though, if you may recall, the colonization of Northeast India was accomplished at a date much later than other regions of India. The British penetration into the Northeast was basically guided by their interests to promote trade and commerce. Commercial consideration was pivotal on the part of the British administration. You know, the economic resources of Assam or the Ahom state, particularly tea, coal, and oil, had attracted the attention of the British. And moreover, the rapid advancement of the Burmese forces and their occupation of Manipur, Kachar, and Assam, and a threatening attitudes towards even Bengal had prompted the British to declare a war on Burma in 1824. You know, if you recall history, we all remember that the Anglo-Burmese War first was concluded with the signing of the treaty. The first Anglo-Burmese War was concluded with the signing of the Treaty of Yendabu. Now, after this, soon after this, the British extended their sphere of influence in Manipur, Kachar, and Jaintia. And while the annexation of Assam brought them in the heart of Northeast India. For the first time in history, the annexation of Assam brought them closely in contact with Northeast India. The hill areas bordering the valley of the Brahmaputra were now exposed for the first time to the British penetration, and the route to Tibet, to Bhutan, China, and Burma came to pass also under their control. So in this way, Assam Valley became more and more attractive for commercial exploitation because of its budding tea industry, mineral resources, and a large variety of timbers. Now, when these prospective commercial opportunities actually delighted, thrilled the British authority, and thereby prompted quick annexation. You know, therefore, the British, in order to safeguard their economic interests, tried to protect these areas, tried to protect their commercial interests in terms of plantation, mining areas, in order to control these resources. You know, they decided to totally bring these areas under their control. But interestingly, the same resources were also the resources that has been used for all ages, from time immemorial, by the hill tribes, the people living in the hills. Beginning from the early first half of the 19th century, particularly from the around 1820s, numerous occasions, the Mizos made an inroad, the people of the Lusa Hills made an inroad into the adjoining territories, plundering and raiding the frontier areas. So when the people from the hill tribes ascending the hills, coming down to the plain areas, ransacking the tea gardens, the plantation industries, and so on, the British felt it necessary to protect their citizens, their subjects, and so on. So the British, you know, for the first time decided to send a punitive expedition, because frequently the people from the hills came down to the plain areas trying to you know, raid the tea gardens and so on. So the British decided to send a punitive expedition under Captain Blackwood, leading to, you know, burning of houses and destroying grains. And even the chief Lalsoklaya was, who was the head of the raiding party, was arrested, was sentenced and transported for life. But however, this action could not really deter the hill people, the Mizos, from raiding the frontier areas. Again, in 1850, Captain Lister, Colonel Lister, was sent to punish the invaders. Here, the colonel also resorted to burning, pillaging of the villages, destroying properties, and so on. And now the Mizo chiefs were very much aware of the fact that the British were hell-bent on meddling in their internal affairs so as to subdue and occupy their only resources, which was their land. The Mizo chiefs were aware of the fact that the British were trying to snatch their economic resources, that is their forests and their land resources. So they were also equally keen to protect their resources. So now the hill people, the Mizos, decided to raid again people in the plain areas, frontier areas, and this prompted the Governor General of India, though initially reluctant, was compelled to order an armed invasion by sending forces into the hills. And this time he sent two columns. The Chittagong column, the first column, the Chittagong column, was placed under the direct command of General Brownlow and Captain Lewin. The second column was led by Brigadier General Bouchier and Mr. Agar. Now, in one of the raids, the Mizo chiefs had raided the tea garden in Alexanderpur tea garden, killed the British planter, kidnapped his daughter, brought back to the hills. Now, this expedition, the Lusa expedition of 1871-72, was successful in rescuing Mary Winchester, who was kidnapped. And after the expedition of 1871-72, there was relative peace, but incidentally, Mahotsav, the southern chief, killed Lieutenant J.F. Stewart along with 2 English bodyguards and a sepoy. This really angered the British administration and decided once again to send a punitive expedition under 3 columns, Bengal, Assam, and Burma in 1889-90. This mass-scale expedition, including 4,600 strong army personnel, very big in scale. Now, the mass-scale expedition was also called Chin Lusai expedition. Now, this expedition succeeded in punishing the offenders and ultimately established the British authority in the Mizo Hills. Following the expedition of 1889-90, for the first time, the British administration imposed house tax, 10 shares of rice from every family, in addition to forced labor. Every family was forced to contribute 6 free laborers annually. Now, the point is, the imposition of tax, house tax, forced labor was a turning point, because it was in this context that the house of Ropwiliani, Chieftainess Ropwiliani, got caught up in the long-drawn struggle against the superimposition of the alien authority. Very significant. The imposition of taxes and forced labor was resented by one and all. Now, Chief Ropwiliani, subaltern, a woman, a chieftainess, was the daughter of Lalsavunga, chief of the north. She was married to Vandula, chief of the south, South Mizoram. As a result of, the imposition of tax and forced labor, Vandula, who was the husband of Ropiliani, defied the British authority and did not want to pay any tax whatsoever or even contribute forced labor. In a bid to exercise their hegemony, the British tried to induce all the Mizo chiefs to their side by making them collaborators and loyal allies. In this regard, it would seem that the British administration was quite successful, and many chiefs, including the brother of Vandula, the husband of Ropiliani, began to submit themselves to the dictum of the new authority, that is the British Raj. However, Vandula, the husband of Ropiliani, defied the alien rule and chose to remain independent, and the British considered him as their grave enemy. Till he died, Vandula never succumbed to the pressure of the British administration. After his death, his son Dotona assumed the throne, assumed power, but Dotona did not live for long. He died, leaving behind minor sons. It was in this period of difficulty, extreme difficulty, that Ropiliani, the aged mother, assumed power and ruled as a regent and a chieftainess. On assuming power, Ropiliani encouraged all her sons, particularly her youngest son and favorite, Laltuama, not to submit to the foreign invaders. The British exerted extreme pressure on the chieftainess Ropiliani, but she stood her ground and even refused to talk to them. She followed a policy adopted by her late husband, and therefore confrontation with the British rule, the British administration, became inevitable. And Ropiliani considered the advance of the British into the Lusa Hills as a calamity. Remember, she considered it as a calamity, as a peril. Therefore, under these circumstances, she was not willing to tolerate foreign intrusion. She accused the British of trying to colonize the Lusa Hills and hated their imposing taxes, demanding of rice, forced labors, and therefore rebuked all efforts of negotiating with the British. Now, she even asked other chiefs to not submit to the dictum of the British administration. Incidentally, one British political officer, C.S. Murray, was killed. The British suspected Ropiliani and her son to have a hand in the killing of C.S. Murray and also in the killing of Lieutenant Stewart in 1888. All along, Ropiliani, the wife of Vandula, chieftainess, and her son Laltoma defied the British and refused to comply with their terms. She would shout and yell from her heart that, I quote her famous saying, her famous words, I quote, "We are chiefs from ages, paid taxes to nobody. No nation had ever imposed on us forced labors. Our citizens would never contribute any labor or tax to foreign people. We will drive the foreigners from our land." She would accuse all those chiefs who submitted to the British as shameful act of cowardice and cried to them, I quote again, "Even if you all surrender, I am here, the daughter of Lalsabunga, the brave ruler of the north, who will never surrender to the foreign rulers. I will call the sons of my brothers from the north, and I will surely push back the foreign invaders from our land and free our nation. So I close quotation. Now, the above this statement, what I have just stated, the statement clearly exhibits her determination to upset the imperial designs, despite the fact that most of the Mizo chief by then had submitted to the British administration. But Ropuilieni was determined to stand her ground. So the British administration was having a very, very hard time. Ropuilieni and her son Laltoma gave them a very, very difficult time. The British administration in the summer of 1889 convened a Darbar, but a Darbar of all the chiefs. All the chiefs attended except Ropuilieni and her son Laltoma. The second Darbar was again convened in 1892. Yet again, Ropuilieni decided not to attend, instead sent one elder from her village. And the third Darbar was again convened at Lunglei, where 32 chiefs attended. And here again, Ropuilieni and her son refused to attend the meeting convened by the British administration. So this act of defiance, made the British really disturbed. It disturbed them so much. Ropuilieni remained stubborn and defiant and repeatedly reject their offer for truce. Therefore, the British administrator, now that we're convinced, capturing Ropuilieni was the only option left so as to prevent imminent threat to their rule in the hills. So amidst the increasing hostility and tensions, the British demands for tributes, on the other hand, continued unabated. Ropuilieni defied all odds. At the same time, the British administration was very, very keen on collecting taxes, imposing forced labors, etc. On one occasion, the British demanded tax from Ropuilieni's village, sent one interpreter to her village. Ropuilieni was very, very angry, and she was fed up with this interpreter and wanted to get rid of him. So this interpreter was killed by one of her the village warrior, and this really angered the British administration and decided to take matters into their once and for all. In early August 1893, the British administration decided to raid on the village of Ropuilieni. The raid was led by Captain John Shakespeare and RHS Hutchinson and Mr. Puck, along with 80 riflemen, ascended her village, then Lung, by surprise. On entering the village, the British administration announced fines to Ropuilieni and her son Laltoma. The fine imposed by the British administration consisted of 30 guns, 10 pigs, 20 foals, 100 mounds of rice, which was to be delivered at their camp in Lunglei. Ropuilieni yet again defied and resisted the British invasion. Ultimately, both the mother and the son were captured, and the entire villages were virtually disarmed. And with the capture of Ropuilieni and her son Laltoma, the people were virtually left without a leader. Now, what may be noted was the fact that when Ropuilieni was captured and was to be taken to Lunglei from her village, Ropuilieni, as a chieftainess, refused to work on food. Very, very interesting, showing her majestic royal culture. She was not willing to work on food and urged her captors, the Britishers, to arrange an alternative means for her to be taken to Lunglei. She was carried on a palanquin in a majestic style. On reaching Lunglei, they were locked in a guard room. Ropuylieni was offered peace, peace to return to her village. But Ropuylieni was adamant and refused the offer. Instead of yielding to their continued demand and pressure, Ropuylieni preferred to remain rebellious and even persuaded her visitors in prison to rise against the alien rulers. In view of her stubbornness and repeated defiance of administration, the British administrative authority considered it unsafe to confine her in the Lusai Hills and therefore decided to deport her away to Chittagong jail. The British government felt it unsafe if Ropuylieni and her son is kept in the Lusai Hills or in Lunglei. She would be able to wield her influence on other Mizo chiefs, and this would not be conducive for the growth and safety of the British administration, and therefore decided to deport her and send her to the Chittagong jail. Unfortunately, when Ropuylieni was taken to Chittagong, modern-day Bangladesh, in the jail, her health deteriorated following an attack with dysentery. Her appetite began to drop, resulting in immense loss of weight. On seeing her condition and fearing embarrassment for Ropuylieni being a state prisoner, the Chittagong State Jail Superintendent wrote a letter to the commissioner advising her release. However, before she was released, Ropuylieni her health gave way and she breathed her last in early January 1895, lying on a prison bed. The jail staff announced that, and the British administration rather announced that Ropuylieni, state prisoner, Lusai chieftainess, died on third sustained of sheer old age. The claim was that she died of sheer old age. It is very difficult to accept that she died of sheer old age as alleged by the British administration. It is more logical that her health succumbed to overwhelming pressure imposed upon her by the British, and that she had to deal with wearisome invaders with their ceaseless demand and forcing her people to servitude. The trauma she suffered incessantly took a mighty toll on her mentally and physically, leading to her demise while fighting for her honor, land, and her people till her last stand. What seemed to be evident was the fact that with her death, the general movement against the British rule also collapsed. The death of Ropuylieni marked the end of a general movement against the British rule, the collapse of a general movement against the British rule in the Lusai Hills. And it now became very easy for the British to subdue other Mizo chiefs with the death of Ropuylieni. From all these accounts, it became very, very clear that Ropuylieni was the architect of Mizo resistance, the tribal resistance to colonial rule. Her character exhibits the greatness of mind, for she could wield strong influence upon other Mizo chiefs. Therefore, in this background, Ropuylieni's role became even more significant and important and formed a part and parcel of freedom movement, and hence belong to the galaxy of freedom fighters. I would want to state that as an Iron Lady, she preferred at her old age to remain in prison till her death than to serve the alien master. She subscribed to an example of the highest standard of patriotism, that the colonial rule, the colonial administrators, the British Raj did not spare her. All showed that she joined hands with other freedom fighters in upsetting the imperial designs in a number of forms. The remarkability, the outstanding peculiarity, the remarkability of Chieftainess Ropiliani was her unshakable ambitions, her dignity and principles, unassailable and charismatic authority, which made even her contemporary Mizo chiefs considered her a symbol and a leader in the resistance movement against the British mighty imperialism. Though deeply grief-stricken and yearning for her homeland, from the jail, yearning for her people, she refused to surrender to the British till the end. Therefore, I would state that her character showed a rare kind of exceptional quality, and proved to be truly a queen. It may have been perhaps for these reasons that even her captors, the British administrators, looked upon her with great regard and respect, and that instead of putting her with other inmates like a scandalous criminal, she was accommodated in the European ward of Chittagong jail, so much so that even the status of a state prisoner was accorded to Chieftainess Ropiliani. And all these clearly were indeed manifestations of respect, admiration, and esteem held by her captors. To wind up my discussion, as I do not have much time, I would state that Ropiliani's chieftainess, the Queen Ropiliani's heroism and her struggles against the imperial rule is still alive in the memories of all the Mizos, all the people in Mizoram, so much so that an example can be cited of one of the greatest female singers, the late Lelsang Silo, to compose a song in her memory, thereby forging a subaltern solidarity, that is, a woman highlighting the role of another woman in the freedom struggle. The contribution, the efforts put on, and the contribution made by Queen Ropiliani can never be underestimated. She would always be among a galaxy of freedom fighters, a galaxy of stars in the annals of Indian history, Indian freedom struggle. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Abin, for your brilliant speech with anecdotes and facts. It's a pleasure now to invite Professor K.V. Reddy, who will talk about subaltern and India's freedom struggle. Professor Reddy, please.
Thank you, Professor S. Pati, Srinivas Pati, and Professor Lalvin Ruanga, both from Public Administration Department and the part of organizing committee. At the outset, I regret for the inconvenience that I had caused due to my laptop technical issues. Now, to start with, first of all, I would like to thank Professor K.R.S. Sambashivarao Garu, Honorable Vice Chancellor and Chief Guest of the Day. It is he who has been consistently trying to put across the message that Mizoram University is ahead of all other universities in the country, even during the pandemic time, by motivating us to conduct number of webinars like these. These are very useful to most of us, as offline classes are not possible. And that is the reason why by now I think we have conducted more than 300. It's a big record. And equally important is the other activities, other developments that we witnessed in the last 4 years or so. Now, with this beginning point, I would like to pay homage to Mahatma Gandhi, the father of the nation, and also Lal Bahadur Shastri, the former Prime Minister. These two important occasions are coinciding with the celebration of 75 years of Indian independence. And keeping this in view, perhaps Professor Pati and the other organizing committee has given me a topic that is little general in nature, and it is about national context. So I thought I would take more time than what it is given to Professor Robin, but I'm afraid by now a lot of time has been consumed. So I may not have it, but still I request the organizers to give me at least same amount of time that has been given to Professor Robin. So otherwise I'll be doing injustice to the topic as well as to the August gathering that is more than 300 as of now. So first of all, I thought Professor Robin would give us the meaning of subalterns, because maybe this August gathering is aware of the meaning of subalterns, and so perhaps he skipped it. So I'd like to do the same with the hope that our gathering, our audience, respected audience, is aware of the meaning. But as far as its meaning is concerned, there is no unanimity on the meaning of subalterns. So different scholars have interpreted differently as per the locale, as per the conditions prevailing in a particular country, as per the specific situations. And therefore, even me, I don't dare to give any simple definition of the subalterns, because this is one of the important dimensions of my topic. Because as far as India's freedom struggle is aware to all of us, so I don't have to discuss much about it as to who participated and under whose leadership, and what has been the achievement, what has been the struggle and sacrifices of those who are responsible for whatever conditions in which we are living today in a democratic society. No, this 75 years of Indians' independence, what has happened over this period of 75 years, and what has been the contribution of subalterns? I thought I would discuss on this, but since the topic is specific about India's freedom struggle, I'll go back to the ages, particularly from 1857 to 1947. So during the course of 90 years, what has happened with regard to the subalterns? As far as others, you all know that much has been discussed in our textbooks, in our school books, everywhere elsewhere in the country. So most of us are aware as to how the mainstream leadership of the Indian freedom struggle has contributed to independence movement. But the point here, since I am asked to discuss the role of subalterns, as to what extent they had contributed to the India's freedom struggle, this is something that has been missed out in our writings, in our activities, in our academic exercises. And so perhaps I should do a little bit focus on this. So as I said, there is no unanimity on the subject. So it has to be contextualized to the local specific conditions. So when subalterns, the issue was introduced by Ranjit Guha and several other scholars, London-based scholars, foreign scholars. Most of them were influenced by Marxist writings. And therefore, this particular word has been coined by Italian Marxist Gramsci. So it is from whom Ranjit Guha and others have adopted this particular concept and tried to contextualize in the context of South Asia and as part of it, Indian subcontinent, as to how in this part of the world, the freedom struggle has been conducted and the role that has been contributed by these forgotten heroes, marginalized communities, masses, vast mass of people. It is this part that is neglected largely, and therefore, I think as part of my brief presentation, I would like to deal with it. So since Professor Robin has excellently presented a case study of a woman warrior from Lushai Hills, presently Mizoram, because most of the audience seems to be from Northeast India and in particular from Mizoram. So Professor Robin's presentation would have been very interesting. But what I would like to do, because my job is little easier in the sense that I would like to relate it to the Indian context during the course of freedom struggle of about 90 years. So the focus would be, of course, freedom struggle was conducted sporadically, spontaneously in various parts of the country at different points of time, but that's not consolidated in the form of freedom struggle in any serious way. So let us take from 1857, the starting point, first war of Indian independence, to the 1947. So in the course of these 90 years, what has happened? We all know about Indian National Congress and the tallest leaders of Indian National Congress being Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru, and of course there are many others. So as to how this leadership had become the mainstream of Indian leadership in the name of Indian National Congress, the major platform for all Indians across the states and communities. So this was possible for this leadership to mobilize all sections of the people. Yet there are dominant sections, remember, that led and participated in a big way. It doesn't mean that masses did not participate. Yes, masses were also participating, but it was not acknowledged in proportion to their population, in proportion to their sacrifices. So that is what is the focus of my presentation. Of course, within the short span of 10 minutes or so, I cannot recount all the sacrifices or all those individuals and events, but yet I'd like to give you a few examples and rush through. So that's one. And at the other level, even this freedom struggle, that's independence movement, has also been interpreted in several ways. For example, in multiple ways. For example, British historians used to think that it is on account of conditions prevailing after Second World War that the British voluntarily handed over power to Indian leadership. So that is in the form of transfer of power. That is how British historians interpret our freedom struggle, our independence movement. But whereas Indian national leadership, whether it is Congress leadership or Gandhi's and Nehru's, it is this, the mainstream leadership of Indian freedom movement, interpret it as the freedom struggle of Indian people. It is due to the sacrifices and prolonged and consistent struggles that the freedom has achieved. It is not because of voluntary submission or handover of freedom by the British that we have achieved freedom. So this is second version. The third version being the parallel movements, besides Indian National Congress, there were several other movements that were going on and on in the country. For example, leftists and communists on the one hand, they were also established way back in 1920s. So they were launching movements. But of course, they had two things in mind. One, freedom struggle, of course. Two, freedom from the exploitation, oppression, so on and so forth. So they have twin objectives. So that's about communists and leftists who have also been participants in the freedom struggle in their own way. Sometimes they were part and parcel of the mainstream movement. At other times they were doing on their own. And there were also others, for example, those who were concerned about communalism. I mean, the communities, for example, Hindu Mahotsav, Muslim League on the one hand, they were also interested about freedom, but they were also focusing about their respective religions, Hinduism on the one hand, a Muslim League on the other hand, Islam. Besides this, from the religious angle, we have about other angles, for example, the caste angle. As far as upper caste, upper strata of the Indian society is concerned, they are part and parcel of the Indian National Congress by and large. Of course, some were leading Communist parties, some were leading Hindu Mahotsav and other parties, but yet, by and large, upper strata or upper caste of our Indian society have been participating actively in the National Congress-led movement. So what I'm trying to tell you, that the other part, the rest of these, they are largely known as the middle caste, lower caste. So they were also feeling about Indian independence movement, but they were also having twin objectives, like I was telling about others. So for example, Mahatma Jyotiba Phule from Maharashtra, and also Dr. B.R. Ambedkar from Maharashtra. So they were also leading, they were also exposing the issues that concern them more than freedom struggle. It doesn't mean they were against freedom. They were also having freedom at most in their minds, in their activities, but yet they were having one more agenda in their activities. That's what is social discrimination, untouchability, exploitation, so on and so forth. So that is the reason why whenever Mahatma Jyotiba Phule, when he was encouraging the English education, so some were criticizing him as if he is close to British or British government, and British is also closely connected with Mahatma Jyotiba Phule, but that's not correct. Similarly, when Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was also trying to expose the issues of downtrodden, particularly the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, at various fora, in various platforms in London and elsewhere within the country. So that time also, Ambedkar was also misunderstood as if he was not cooperating with Mahatma Gandhi. He was trying to become a hurdle in the freedom struggle. But the point I'm making is simple, that these parallel movements, whether they were led by communists or communalists or the Mahatma Jyotiba Phule, OBCs, or scheduled castes, scheduled tribes. Professor Robin has given us just one case of Lushai Hills, Mizoram, as to how a woman warrior from Mizoram could become, an icon. Similarly, there were several such marginalized communities, scheduled tribes, scheduled castes, OBCs in various parts of the country. I can just give a couple of these. So that's the reason why. So just before I stop here, let me also say something about subalterns. So if these are three versions, British version, Indian National Congress version, parallel movements, the fourth version, as I understand, is of subaltern version. So subalterns are those from British educated, London based, Marxist influenced scholars who were having some critical points about the versions of British, versions of International Congress, versions of communalists, versions of communists, versions of Ambedkar, versions of Phule. So they would like to give a different interpretation. That's what is subaltern interpretation. In the name of marginalized, in the name of forgotten heroes, in the name of rest of Indians, masses of the people, subalterns had tried to project the movements, spontaneous movements, specific issue-based movements in various parts of the country, particularly with regard to peasants and others. So it is this contribution of Ranjit Guha, Dipesh Chakravarti, Gayatri, and many others, Shahid Amin, Sudipto Kaviraj, like that there are many scholars who are responsible for bringing about a dozen volumes with regard to the subaltern studies. And in fact, subaltern studies has raised an awareness level among many, particularly those of us who are studying in various universities, a certain amount of this. So this was the contribution of subalterns from 1982 to 2005. About 12 books have been brought about with a different perspective. As I said, it is critical of all those four versions. Now, yes, please. Few more points I'd like to put across. So I said the British Columbia scholars were simply telling us that it is not because of freedom struggle that India achieved freedom, but because of otherwise. But whereas international leaders have said it, but the subalterns consider that Indian national leadership that was under the clutches of Indian National Congress and Gandhi and Nehru's was elitist, upper strata, upper caste, feudal landlord, capitalist, English educated, urban based leaders. So that's what is international leadership. So therefore, subalterns are critical of all that. So as part of parallel, I've already discussed, but let me give you a few examples, like the Tebaga movement of peasants in West Bengal, very renowned movement. Telangana, it was part of Hyderabad state. Armed peasant struggle was launched against Indian armies and also against Nizam and also against British. And then in Andhra also, there were several movements. For example, tribal movement in West Godavari district of Andhra, Allur Sitaramaraju was well known in Rampa Chodavaram in West Godavari district, who led against British in his own way. He sacrificed his life. And also in Madras state, in Kerala, Kunnappara, Vailar, these were such important movements that were well known. And in Bombay also, port workers, dock workers, several others as part of trade unions, they were all led. So these were some important parallel movements, and they were class-oriented, leftist, at the same time, peasant, worker-oriented. But unfortunately, they were confined to just limited areas, as I've just pointed out. Besides these, I have said about religion-based Hindu Mahasabha, Muslim League and all, caste-based Pule Ambedkar, tribal-based Birsa Munda, Allur Sitaramaraj, as Professor Ravin has pointed out in the case of Mizoram. Like that, there are such cases in every state. Several Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, several tribal movements were also there. Now, the point is, the focus of this discussion is independence from British and free from local and specific issues. These are the two objects, the twin objectives of these parallel movements. So, but as I said before, at times both are counterposed as against, that these caste movements are against independence movement. But that's not the case. It is largely because of misunderstanding that prevailed and that continued on and on. And in fact, that was done deliberately by some perhaps who do not know. But the issues that I've raised in the case of Pule and others were that. I can also give one more example of Ambedkar's demands about separate electorate in the Roundtable Conference in London. And thereafter, with regard to Pune Pact also, Mahatma Gandhi was on hunger strike for several days. So Ambedkar had to compromise. And as a result of which, whatever reserved seats that we have today are because of Pune Pact. But that's not to the liking of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Ambedkar had to compromise with Mahatma Gandhi because Mahatma Gandhi was exerting pressure morally through his hunger strike. So this is the reason why the marginalized communities and their leaderships were in no position to take on, to overtake the mainstream leadership of the country. That is the reason why they had become forgotten. So as part of these subalterns, perhaps time has come to point out as to what has happened in the history, whether their contribution has been recognized or not. This is something we, the academics, have to do. Let me point out one more important thing. As subaltern studies were being conducted in 1980s, same time Government of India has also sponsored a project called Towards Freedom project through ICHR in Delhi. Incidentally, I was part of that project for 1 year when I was a student of PhD in JNU. I was working under Professor Mushrul Hassan, who was the editor of the volume of 1939. So as part of that, I could also see myself various documents of the year 1939. So the purpose of this government activity, state activity, was to expose as to how various spontaneous movements, small movements in various parts of the country were brought to the light, so that the British theme of transfer of power is not correct, whereas power for struggle, the power has been achieved. It's only because of struggle of the Indian people. So that's the purpose of the ICHR project of Government of India. So this could also elevate as to what has been the history of Indian freedom struggle. Now, this concept, so various Marxists unfortunately were involved. I don't think Professor Mushrul Hassan was a Marxist, but there were many others as part of that Towards Freedom project. They were involved. That's why they could not highlight the contributions of Ambedkar and Pule and many other marginalized communities. So that is why it could not see the light of the day. It was considered simply as a government-sponsored project. Now, coming to the subaltern studies, in specific from 1980s to 2005, as I've said, Ranjit Guha and several others have contributed. Of course, it's a very controversial subject. So I'm afraid I cannot speak much on this because it goes against the official version of the government. But yet, as I said, it is the subaltern were criticizing British version because it was pro-colonial. It was criticizing nationalist elitist because it was also Gandhian. It was criticizing communal leftists, etc., Marxists, so on and so forth. So what actually they want, subaltern studies or subaltern scholars wanted was history from below is something that has to be highlighted. Earlier, so far, whether it is colonial history or international history, they were trying to project kings and queens and their achievements, and later on Gandhis and Nehrus and their achievements. Maybe Bhagat Singh's and all, Subhash Chandra Bose and all. But it's not Bhagat Singh alone. Bhagat Singh may be aware to all of us. But along with Bhagat Singh, there were two others who were also assassinated, who were killed. Rajguru, Sukhdev. They were belonging to marginalized communities. Like that, there were several women leaders. Jalkari Bai in Bundelkhand region. So Jhansi Lakshmibai is known to all of us. But the one who sacrificed more than Jhansi Lakshmibai was Jalkari Bai, belonging to a particular community. Like these, subalterns, as part of subalterns, several essays focus on these, and also about women contributors to the freedom struggle. So as part of history from below, it is of the masses, not of classes. It's about marginalized, downtrodden, scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, forgotten heroes. It's not Bhagat Singh alone, but there were many others. It was not Jhansi Lakshmibai alone, there were many others. So besides these, there were some identity-based groups. They had also fought for Indian freedom struggle in the form of peasants, workers, tribals, women, Dalits, so on and so forth. So certainly, their contribution raises some awareness level and a new dimension in historiography, and certainly it's an eye-opening to all of us. But even these subaltern studies are also subjected to criticism because it is largely influenced by British-educated upper caste Marxist scholars. They fail to contextualize to a large extent the Indian ground realities, and they had misplaced priorities. Okay, they were simply countering British version with Indian version. That's not the case. So they were also neglecting the unequal social hierarchy in the country. So they were also undermining Ambedkar's position. So to conclude it by way forward to relate it with the contemporary context, I'll take just one or 2 minutes. So unless multiple dimensions are covered objectively and in toto, we will not get comprehensive picture of freedom struggle. Hardly. So if you don't do that, there's hardly any scope for real history. Whoever rules, so is their history authored accordingly. As somebody said some time ago, ruling classes will have their history. They will write their history. So those who are ruled, their history will not be uncovered. So obviously only kings and queens were exposed before, so far, and Gandhis and Nehrus projected today. So ignoring and neglecting large mass of people who sacrificed in the struggle, is something that we need to note. And it is time to undertake retrospective study of history at all levels, so as to appreciate the role and contribution of all sections of the society. Of course, it is connected with political power and ideology of the ruling party. Hence, as you know, in the present political dispensation, the Narendra Modi regime, as to how the courses have been changed in several universities. The other day we saw in Kerala, Kannur, the Veer Savarkar and many other, Golwalkar, the RSS ideologues, the material is also being imposed on scholars. I don't know whether it is correct or not, but the state, because it has got power, numerically strong, they think they can put across whatever they feel like as part of textbooks, educational courses. So this is what is going to happen. That's the point I'm trying to make. So hence the debate continues in our academic circles as usual. However, howsoever controversial it may be. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Varanda.
Thank you, Professor Reddy, for a brilliant exposition of the parallel movements and your arguments in favor of rewriting history. You are right that by rewriting history, we may reinvent ourselves. Thank you so much. So before I call upon Professor Jokai Truangi, our esteemed colleague, to propose a vote of thanks, Professor Lalin Turanga, our Dean, Professor Turanga, would you like to speak something, or I will straight go for vote of thanks? Because I skip my speech because of cost of time. Okay.
No, I better skip. I will skip because there is another program.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Truanga.
Please unmute, sir. Unmute.
I request Professor Jokai Truangi, our former Dean School of Social Sciences, and our esteemed colleague, Professor of Psychology, so that she has given kind consent to propose a vote of thanks, while one of our panelists told me, sir, she can also speak. I said, yes, for better time, some other time, we'll listen to Professor Truangi. So today, I request her to please propose a vote of thanks. Professor Jokai Truangi.
Thank you, sir. Honorable Chief Guest, respected VC, Professor Samba Sivarao, teachers, and our dear students. Good afternoon on these glorious days of celebration of our great nation's 75th Independence Day. This Azadi ka Amrit Mahotsav is a series of events organized by the government of India to commemorate the 75th anniversary of independence. This official journey of Azadi ka Amrit Mahotsav commences on the 12th of March 2021, which starts at 75 weeks, count down to our 75th anniversary of independence, and will end post a year on 15th August 2023. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are in celebrating our independence. I feel proud to propose this vote of thanks on behalf of MZU, School of Social Sciences, the entire fraternity of this university. On behalf, first of all, my sincere thanks to Almighty God for making today events a grand success. By His blessings and grace, we are able to make the events what it was. At the very onset, we pay a rich tribute to the father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi. His story is endless story. More and more we know, more and more we have to learn. It is really interesting. And, we have to learn a lot from him. We are also grateful to all freedom fighters, not only of, afar and near, all of them are fighting for us, who sacrifice everything for the independence of our country. Yes, they fought, led their life, sacrificing their today for our today. In this way, they left us a full step to follow. As they fought a freedom for us from the foreign clutch, and this day we also have to continue to fight for social evils. At different level of our capacity, we have to fight. So many social evils are still among us, the corruption, so many corruptions are there, financial corruptions there, and time corruptions also there. There could be so many corruptions. Addiction also, so many addictions is with us, and even the sexual harassment and so on. This long stretch celebration should have taught us where we can stand and fight for our nation. We are highly grateful to our chief guest, our Vice Chancellor, Professor K.R.S. Sir, for giving your valuable time for us, gracing the occasion, and sharing your thoughts to inspire us. We are very thankful to you, sir. Our Pro-Vice Chancellor also there, and he is ex-dean of the social sciences. Thank you so much for your presence, sir. And we indebted our speaker of today, Professor K.V. Reddy and Professor K. Robin. They have remind us so many things about our freedom fighters, and we have to learn a lot from that. And we are very thankful that your thoughts have enlightened our minds and shown us a new path to follow, our freedom fighters. We express our sincere thanks to you for adoring the occasions and sharing your expertise and opinions today. And we would like to express a deep sense of thankfulness to our Dean, Professor Lalrin Suanga, and other professors, ex-deans, and other members and members of so many who joined these occasions, and non-teaching staff for taking initiatives in arranging this program, and participants from different parts of India. Because of you, we success today our celebration of Indian independence. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for being with us this afternoon. It is a great pleasure for us, especially for me. Once again, I thank you one and all. Take your leave with a grateful hearts, having a duty to free our nation from many social evils from your own capacity. Thank you so much. Thank you all. Over to our chairman.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, our honorable chief guest, our honorable vice chancellor and pro vice chancellor. Thank you, one and all. Thank you. Stay safe. Good luck.